Good morning and welcome to Rising. Happy Thursday. Our show today is just fine and dandy, and we can't wait to tell you all about it. Let's get started, Jess.
Yes, we are going to tee things off today with the latest on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The independent presidential candidate seems to be doing a little bit of networking. He sought a meeting with Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris to discuss the possibility of serving in her administration in exchange for an endorsement from Kennedy, according to the Washington Post. Reports say the Kennedy team floated the position of cabinet secretary. Kennedy wrote in a text message last night, quote, "We've reached out repeatedly through the highest level intermediaries. We've been told that they have no interest in talking with me," according to the New York Times.
Kennedy told the Washington Post that he thinks Harris is making a mistake in not meeting with him. "I think it's a strategic mistake for them," he said. "That's my perspective. I think they ought to be looking at every opportunity. I think it's going to be a very close race." This comes just weeks after Kennedy and Republican nominee Donald Trump were in similar talks. Kennedy inquired about a role in advising Trump on health and medical issues in a possible second term, which resulted in no actual agreement. Now, the latest polling from 538 shows Kennedy at 5% nationally, with Harris at 46.2% and Trump at 43.6%. Kennedy is fighting a legal effort to keep him off of the ballot in New York after a Democratic group challenged the validity of the address he had listed relating to his petition. A New York judge recently ruled him ineligible to appear on that ballot. Now, Kennedy did get some good news, however, recently. He will likely appear on Maine's ballot in November after a hearing set to challenge his name on the ballot was canceled. Maine resident James Stretch filed a petition challenging Kennedy's spot on the ballot last week, but withdrew it without explanation. Because it was the only challenge brought against Kennedy in the state of Maine, the Secretary of State there, Shenna Bellows, canceled the hearing that was scheduled for this morning. Earlier this month, Bellows' office confirmed Kennedy had qualified for Maine's November general election ballot.
I really liked there was a spicy exchange with RFK Jr. and Sean Hannity on Fox News earlier in the week, where Hannity was asking, "Are you in this till Election Day?" And Bobby Kennedy said, "Yes. If Fox News lets me on the debate stage, I will win the election." And Hannity was like, "I don't make up the rules, but there are rules. You have to show X amount of polling." And he responded, Bobby Kennedy said, "They're making up the rules, Sean. If they had the presidential debate in commission, I would be on the stage." So things got a little heated, more than I think people were expecting on Fox News, but he's kind of right. He should be on the debate stage.
He should be on the debate stage regardless of if it's, if Fox is the venue, CNN's the venue, ABC, NBC, CBS, it doesn't matter. I agree. Absolutely, Kennedy should be on the debate stage. And when the mainstream media and the corporate media are trying to keep him out of the public eye, of course his poll numbers are going to go down. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're like, well, you don't have 15% or whatever you need to qualify under the Presidential Debate Commission rules, which is stupid and doesn't matter anyway because they threw out that rule book. They're not going by it. They're not. Biden and Trump were not following. They were not working with the debate commission, so it doesn't matter what the debate commission says. They could absolutely accept a lower polling threshold. But anyway, how's he supposed to get there if they're not giving him any time and attention and they're just singularly focused on the major candidates? Now, what did you make of his efforts to make an agreement with Kamala? I think this is politics. This is something that, in our winner-take-all system where it's very difficult for third-party and independent candidates to get anything, they don't get, if you get 5% or 10% share of the vote, in another system, in Britain, for instance, that means you get 5 or 10% of the representation in the government. Broadly speaking, that's how it works in other electoral systems. In our system, you get nothing unless you get 51% of the vote. So one of the only ways you can leverage your 5 or 10% is to make some kind of deal with one of the two leading candidates for their support and some role in the administration. That is one of the only ways to turn your level of support into tangible, actionable power and influence. So I think that's absolutely fine that he sought it from both Trump and Kamala, but it seems like nothing came of it.
I have a feeling Trump offered it the way that phone call sounded, right? When we heard the leaked audio, thanks to RFK Jr.'s son, I guess. Someone on the campaign was recording in that room and leaked it. It really sounded like Trump was groveling a little bit, like, "Oh, this would be so good for you, Bobby." It seemed like it was coming from Trump, but maybe Kennedy hadn't considered it yet. I mean, of course, that's going to come at some point in the race, whereas an independent candidate who's not polling in the amount that you would need to win 270 electoral college votes, you might say, okay, let's think about who I can drop out and endorse in exchange for a cabinet position. This would have been so smart for the Harris campaign. I think she's terrified of the liberals within the Democratic Party who would say RFK Jr. is a conspiracy theorist and he hates vaccines and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's kind of scary to me because I know people live in a bubble, and RFK Jr. has gone back on a lot of that and said, listen, I know it sounded like I was saying this, but this is actually what I meant. And it's just ridiculous to cling on to what the old version of what someone said was, which they definitely do with RFK Jr. I think that's where this is coming from. This would have been a smart political move. There's no other explanation for where this is coming from. They're terrified of the liberals that hate RFK Jr.
Oh, for sure. Can you imagine if she did offer him some role in the administration? Well, I don't know. Maybe there's nothing she can do that is going to actually generate some serious heat from the media because they're so in the tank for her. But if anything would cause a full media rebellion against Kamala Harris, it would be doing anything accommodating of RFK Jr. at all, right? The mainstream people would freak out. Maybe they wouldn't care because they're so pro Kamala. But you can imagine that being something because they've been just so thunderously anti RFK Jr. Right, talking about him, his conspiracy theorist, all of that. But really, I don't think there's much of a home anymore in the Democratic Party for someone like RFK Jr., who, while being very progressive and very much a Democrat on a lot of economic issues, a lot of environmental related issues, because of his views on vaccines, which I don't agree with him for the most part about the vaccines themselves. I absolutely agree they should not be required, and that a lot of this, the tyranny associated with COVID stuff is very bad. But I think that's a non-starter in the highest levels of the Democratic Party now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about just how liberal Democrats reacted. When some of them follow me, I don't know why, but when we talked about whether or not going to school was okay during the pandemic. And Emily Oster was an advisor in my graduate program, and I was following her collection of data. Even when the CDC wasn't doing it, she was doing it independently. And it showed that there wasn't a high spread in schools. And people, mostly of upper middle class families, were outraged because these are families that can afford a laptop, they can afford a webcam, they have stable Wi-Fi connection, so their kid can go to school from home. Working class families don't have the child care to supervise a child being at home, let alone have the technology necessary to facilitate that. So it could have been a scenario where, yeah, kids can still go to school, but we just put a Zoom stream up in the classroom. And if you want to be a bougie person and let your kid go to school at home because you're worried about the pandemic, you can do that. That could have been an option. But just for questioning it and saying, you know what, maybe it wasn't a good policy that we forced everyone to do school from home because of these resource issues among working class Americans. Liberal Democrats lost their minds. They were like, how could you be so evil? When it seems they haven't thought through the problem. And that's the kind of person I think the Harris campaign is calculating with this and saying, you know what, that we can't have him on the ticket. We can't have this endorsement. But that would have been so smart because think about the voters that would go for Trump that are currently going for RFK Jr. And if he made a case for Harris and said, I'm going to be in the administration, I'm going to fight for these ideals that you believe in, she would win a significant margin of votes that she's not getting right now.
I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't. Maybe this is going to be an agreeable day for us. We're off to a good start.
Who knows?
We're off to a really good start today, Jessica. More Rising right after this.
Robbie, this is awkward. I think you have the same guy on your radar that I had on my journal.
We shall find out, I think.
What's on your radar, Robbie?
Well, here we go. Terry Breton is the European Union's Commissioner for Internal Markets. His responsibilities include overseeing the government's policies relating to online speech. In effect, this makes him the European Commission's would-be censor-in-chief, and he is eager to wield his power against unruly dissenters. Case in point, on Monday, Elon Musk interviewed former President Donald Trump live on X, the social media site previously known as Twitter, of course. Millions of people listened to at least part of that conversation, which covered a range of newsworthy topics, everything from the recent attempt on Trump's life to support for the mass deportation of illegal immigrants. Now, the interview clearly irked Breton, who had previously warned Musk about creating a, quote, risk of amplification of potentially harmful content. His open letter to Musk, which went very viral on the internet earlier this week, teemed with bureaucratic doublespeak. He began by recognizing the platform's right to participate in free expression, and then immediately voided this protection by threatening sanctions against so-called hate speech and misinformation. And I quote, "This notably means ensuring, on the one hand, that freedom of expression and of information, including media freedom and pluralism, are effectively protected, and on the other hand, that all proportionate and effective mitigation measures are put in place regarding the amplification of harmful content." He wrote, "This is important against the background of recent examples of public unrest brought about by the amplification of content that promotes hatred, disorder, incitement to violence, or certain instances of disinformation." That's Britain's threats, which are not at all idle. The European Commission, in fact, is currently investigating X and other social media companies, but in X's case, for allegedly violating Europe's Digital Services Act, which is the main basis for this investigation being that Britain does not approve of X's new user verification policy. Yes. Under the old Twitter rules, the site would take it upon itself to verify sufficiently important people. Musk disliked this elitist practice and instead permitted all users to purchase verification. For some reason, Breton believes that verification should function whatever way he thinks is best. By personally threatening Musk with further reprisals for allowing hatred and disinformation in the context of the Trump interview, Breton has upped the ante considerably. Trump is, after all, a candidate for the presidency, and there is significant public interest in letting people listen to what he has to say, even if some European bureaucrats are perturbed by it. In fact, the European Union seems to think that Breton overstepped. In a statement, the organization noted that its president had not approved Breton's actions, and several anonymous officials complained to the media about him. This is probably a good time to mention that Breton's position is effectively an unelected one. EU commissioners are not chosen by the people. They are selected via secretive backroom dealing involving the European Council and the incoming EU president. The European Parliament has to approve or reject the entire slate of commissioners. It's slightly more transparent than the process for picking the Pope. Should unelected European bureaucrats meddle in political dialogue and work to prevent American presidential candidates from speaking their mind? The question answers itself, as Congressman Ro Khanna, a Democrat, correctly notes in a post on X, "In America, we value free speech, including conversations like the one Elon Musk is having tonight, with ideas and opinions people may dislike or even find offensive. We don't censor. Ironic, this used to be a European idea, advocated by someone named John Stuart Mill." Well said. Now, thankfully, the U.S. political system includes much stronger protections for free speech than our European counterparts. But that doesn't mean political dialogue is completely safe. On the contrary, Democratic activists are currently attempting to weaponize campaign finance laws against Trump and Musk to punish them for daring to speak. End Citizens United, a Democratic political action committee, filed a formal complaint about the Musk-Trump interview with the Federal Election Committee. The PAC wants the FEC to regard the interview as an illegal campaign contribution from X, the corporate entity, to Trump. The Donald Trump-Elon Musk campaign rally hosted on X wasn't just an incoherent diatribe of lies marred by technical difficulties. It was blatantly illegal corporate contribution to Donald Trump's campaign. That's according to Tiffany Muller, the president of that group, End Citizens United, in a statement. She also said the brazen corporate contribution undermines campaign finance laws and would set a dangerous precedent for unfettered direct corporate engagement in campaigns, end quote. Now look, it's true that corporations cannot directly give money to federal candidates. They have to give money to PACs, which can then engage in campaigning on behalf of the candidates. It's a very roundabout system, and one wonders what the improvement of it actually is. Anyway, the Musk-Trump interview is clearly not a campaign contribution as defined by federal election law. If it were, then every private media organization would be equally guilty of breaking the law when they interview candidates, something they do all the time. We do it here on this show. The political candidates regularly appear on TV, radio, and podcasts. They are interviewed for web and print publications. These are not considered campaign contributions, and if the government treated them as such, then the First Amendment would quite obviously have been infringed. Quote, similar complaints might be made of television interviews roundtables and forums, says Will Duffield, an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute, who I asked about this yesterday. He also says the FEC should decline this invitation to police our nation's newsrooms. Duffield notes that anyone can file a complaint with the FEC, and there's no reason to think that the agency will necessarily take action here. Still, it's an example of a discouraging trend in American progressive circles toward greater hostility toward unfettered speech. Would-be Thierry Bretons are lurking everywhere in the shadows, testing the strength of our free speech protections. And these folks speak for the Progressive Coalition. They are the people who believe that democracy is at stake in the 2024 presidential election. Well, is not free speech a norm of democracy? I mean, never mind that these are also the same people who said that clumsy, unsophisticated attempts by Russian forces to make fake anti-Hillary Clinton accounts on Facebook, that constituted foreign election interference. Okay, in that case, what should we call it when domestic progressive activists try to sick the FEC on a private company for allowing Trump to speak to the voters? Is that election interference? How would we describe the actions of Thierry Breton, who would use the powers of unelected office to intimidate an American presidential candidate into silence if he could? Is that perhaps foreign election interference? I wonder.
Is it, Robbie?
Is it?
Okay, so we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I think it's a very good point to point out this is what the mainstream media does. That you have corporate owners of mainstream media who have political perspectives and are pushing a political message. I think that the FEC lawsuit likely won't be successful because of that exact argument. I do think the EU letter is something that I would feel differently about if this wasn't the owner of the social media company pushing it. Mm-hmm. Because it kind of feels like what we see in corporate media, where like the head of Fox or the head of MSNBC or CNN, whatever, they go and they have a meeting with someone who's high up in the Federal Reserve. They're having whiskey in DC, and the Fed's like, yeah, we think the labor market's too hot. We want wages to go down. We've got to do something about inflation. We need you to talk about how high interest rates are going to stop inflation. And they're like, great, our corporate sponsors love when wages are low. Like, we're going to be on message. That's not the government controlling the media, but that is the ruling class all being on the same page. And there's no violations there for them pushing a political agenda on their network. And so I think in the case of the EU, I do believe they're mad at Musk because he posted that Telegraph article that said Keir Starmer's putting people in detainment camps, and that caused a lot of people who follow Elon Musk in the UK to freak out. And I don't know what those sanctions would be. Maybe it would just be like, hey, you have to invest more money on community notes and people writing those if you're gonna continue to operate in the UK. Something like that I think would be fair and reasonable, and I would feel differently if it wasn't Musk who's the owner writing it.
Yeah, I looked a little bit more closely at what the investigation into X is currently, and I was surprised by how petty it is. It's literally because this guy, who I obviously from my radar don't hold in very high regard, Terry Breton, doesn't like the new verification policy because he thinks it allows people to become verified and then thus be misleading about who they are. But the old system was just verification at random, and that's like the entire basis of the investigation. And it has to be observed and like understood that he was not voted into this position by the people. The way the European Commission ends up picking its leaders is very weird. It is a secretive backroom process, and they just all get approved or not approved. So he ended up in this position of incredible, immense power to set tech-related, speech-related policies for the EU without any kind of democratic mandate to do that. I, of course, agree with you that post Elon made, and many of the posts he's made on social media have been bad. And I guess my biggest criticism of Elon is that he simultaneously seeks to be a referee of the system, or the rule maker for the system on social media, and also its most important user. Mm-hmm. And you kind of got to pick one or the other. Like his policies, when he puts up polls saying, "Should I bring this person back?" Well, now we're putting it to a vote. We don't have a policy. We have a. So there's a certain level of trollishness and dysfunction that he brings. But I think all that should be absolutely legal. It's not a question of whether the government should suppress it, or at least it shouldn't be in America. It is a question in Europe, and I think that's that's regrettable.
I would love to see a hearing on this policy around verification where they put up Doja Cat, who changed her name to like Merry Christmas or Christmas time or Mrs. Claus, something Christmassy. And she said, I don't want to be Christmas anymore. Elon Musk, please help me, because he locked everyone's verification. You could like only change your name once if you were verified to prevent people from impersonating others. And then Musk responded, okay, fixed it. And then her name is changed to Elon Musk with a blue check, and she goes, thank you.
You have to be careful about changing. So I bought the blue check mark and then immediately changed like my profile picture or something.
Yeah.
And then they take it away if you do that because they have to re-verify. So they are doing like a re-verify when you update something to make sure you're still representing yourself fairly, because it caused a temporary lapse in my check mark. So I've been hesitant to change anything about my bio further, because you temporarily lose the check mark while they check it.
I know the EU is looking into users' data being misused by X in their view, but I think anyone who's given their data to Musk, if that's the same lawsuit about the verification, these are all people who bought the blue check mark who love Elon Musk. They would probably be like, okay, I don't care that he has my data. So I want to look into more of what that lawsuit is like. Like, what is the misuse of the data? We heard RFK Jr. this week talking about the Twitter algorithm. There's a lot going on in X this election cycle.
Right, and I am perfectly willing to believe that data is being misused by social media companies. But then again, you always get into some territory where you are implicitly giving them your data when you sign up. I mean, absolutely, the data can fall into the wrong hands, and there should be greater transparency about it. And social media companies have violated their stated commitment to you in the past but also the government is pressuring them at all times to give up your data to the government. The way to solve that is to just have better end-to-end encryption, which is what a lot of the platforms are moving to, so that then when the government says, give us the data on these people, the social media company gets to go, can't, sorry, we don't have it.
Yeah.
So we'll see about that. More Rising right after this. The mainstream media is in love with the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz ticket, even though Harris has yet to do a major interview with a journalistic outlet. Amazing. President Biden did, however, submit himself to scrutiny from an interview a few days ago with CBS, and it did not go particularly well at all, raising the question of whether Biden is capable of making it through to the rest of his term and finishing it out. In a recent column for The Hill, Steve Krakauer wonders if this year's October surprise would in fact be Biden dropping out of the presidency and clearing the way for President Harris a bit early. Steve Krakauer, producer of The Megyn Kelly Show, News Nation contributor, and Hill columnist, joins us now.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. So, you pay close attention to the tone of the media coverage of presidential politics, same as I do. I've found it just fascinating how the switch from the incredibly critical of Biden to the point where they, played a strong role in forcing him to drop out of the presidential race to this coverage of Harris Walz that is like Obama reminiscent in how favorable it is, without her actually, doing much to play ball with the media. She's not in conversation with them. She's not putting out policies. She's changed her mind about things via representatives speaking on her behalf. And yet she still commands their loyalty.
Oh yeah, compare it to Obama in 2007, 2008. At least it was a much more substantive reason for them to go all in on Obama. I mean, he was completely compelling. He was the new thing. I mean, this is much more vibes based than that was. The coverage is the same, but it's they're trying a whole lot harder to make it happen here. And I think, I write a lot about media bias, and I'm critical of the corporate media in a lot of areas. And a lot of times it's very subtle. The things that are going on. I think you mentioned that Biden interview with CBS. I think that's a really interesting case of subtle media bias that we see. This is the way they have covered the Democratic side of the ticket during let's say the last 2 months has been one of the more blatant, not subtle at all, versions of media bias that we've seen. I mean, they were telling us that Biden is the best Biden ever, all the way up until that debate at the end of June. And then from that debate for about the next 4 weeks, it was a complete pressure campaign used with reputational blackmail, both from the Pelosi side of the political establishment and the media themselves, to push Joe Biden out of the race because they believed he could not win. So that was a huge switch. And then now they've installed Kamala Harris, anointed her to the top of the ticket, and it is pure, just fawning, ridiculous, over-the-top coverage that I will say we're just starting to see cracks a little bit. I think the media is starting to feel a little bit like, hey, maybe sit with us for an interview. We'll be easy on you. And they still refuse to do it. She said, oh, maybe the end of the month. There's reports that maybe it'll be after Labor Day. I mean, this is completely absurd. But so far, they've gone completely all in on Kamala Harris, all in the service of making sure that Donald Trump does not get a second term.
Speaking of Joe Biden, I thought his, performance in that interview he did with CBS was real bad. Maybe, by the standards he'd set recently, it was not some kind of new low is maybe the best thing you could say about it. I read your column you wrote for The Hill. Do you think he makes it through the rest of this presidency? He's only got a couple of months to go. But the decline he has suffered, I think really in the last 6 months is when it kicked into high gear. And it's sad to talk about. We've all had elderly people in our lives kind of round this corner, and it's not, I frankly feel bad, even though I don't agree with any of his policies and don't really appreciate his presidency. I feel bad for him, and it's hard to watch someone go through this while still be in a position to have the most important job on planet Earth and be expected to perform it at this time of economic crisis and foreign policy crises and all of that. Can he make it?
Yeah, it's sad for Biden. It's sad for the country, honestly. And I think that the truth of it is that Joe Biden has had suffered a massive cognitive decline over the course of years. And I'm not so sure there's anything really significantly, substantively different now than there was 2 months ago or 6 months ago. I think that this is who he is now. And the question is, I think of what happens next, which I lay out in the column in The Hill, is really how he's going to be used. He is essentially being used by the political establishment on the left. At first, it was a conduit to win in 2024. Who knows what would have happened if the debate never really went down the way it did, if it never happened at all, and he won. I'm not so sure he would have lasted more than a few months in the presidency at that point before he was swapped out for Kamala Harris anyway. But then after that, he was used to be pushed aside. Okay, you can stay as president, but Kamala will be running now in 2024. And yes, as I lay out, I believe that there is absolutely a scenario where if it continues to be close, and there's been a huge wave, and Kamala Harris has gotten a huge amount of momentum, but this is a very close election still. In the key swing states, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, that are going to really determine what happens in November. This is neck and neck. And so if it's continuing down that path, wait until after September 10th at the debate, because I think that if Kamala is a little bit shaky there, if Trump performs well like he did in that first debate with Biden, I think you're going to see calls for Kamala Harris to be installed as the president, to run as the incumbent in October, leading into November. Let her have a mini crisis, whether manufactured or real, to show that she is strong and powerful and is up for the job, and Biden just gets pushed aside. I think that's a very real possibility here, and I think that's a shoe that is still yet to drop in this crazy, chaotic year that I think is a very real possibility that we might be faced with.
I mean, it would be entirely characteristic of Kamala Harris's rise for her to just, yes, be installed as president that way. She was installed as the candidate via that means. The Democratic elite, donors, media people picked her. And so she was able to completely avoid the primary process, doing debates with other Democrats, maybe to her advantage, frankly. There's something to this Definitely. Where she's not had to alienate any part of the progressive coalition, even though I suspect her policies on, for instance, Israel are going to prove just as divisive to young left-leaning people as her boss, Joe Biden. I mean, she's part of the administration who's done it. Is she going to break from them? I don't expect it. But she hasn't had to say anything about it. We don't know what version of her is even running or what her policies are, and she's been allowed to get away with that.
Yeah, and Robbie, I mean, I think the Kamala coronation that's going to be happening next week in Chicago at the DNC is going to be one to watch. But I think that we've already started to see a little bit of what may be happening as well outside, which is the protests. And there is going to be major efforts, I think, to not just allow this to happen, mainly from the progressive side of the left. But I will say, it's so funny. I saw a post on X from Ben Smith of Semaphore yesterday talking about how this is a new model for how we should be doing elections. really condensed. And he did mention, okay, maybe we condense all the primaries right before the convention so it can kind of lead up to it. But this is a new model. It's great for Kamala Harris because it involved zero scrutiny. It allows her to really take her time when it comes to, and I'm being very kind about it, take her time when it comes to announcing what her policies are. Her website, which has been in existence now for nearly a month, has no policies on it at all. And you can buy lots of merch. You can buy the camo hat, but you can't find out what she actually believes on things. We're just going to start to learn about that maybe tomorrow and certainly during the convention. But yeah, this is a way for a candidate to escape scrutiny, both from her own side and from the media. And as of now, we have not seen a lot of media push back to this idea at all. They have been right along for the ride.
Tune in this weekend to catch the rest of my interview with Steve Krakauer. Thanks for joining us. Latest polling by 538 shows Vice President Kamala Harris leading former President Donald Trump 52% to 48% nationally. Longtime pollster Frank Luntz shared his insights on why Trump is behind. Let's watch.
There are issues, attributes, and the conditions of the country. The issues and conditions favor Donald Trump. He should be winning this election. But the attributes are so much in Harris's favor that he's not. That the very attributes that Trump offers, and the best example, you did the story on the UAW, why is Donald Trump saying publicly, I want to fire the same people that he's getting now, still getting union members? It's ridiculous. It's as though he's lost control. And I know that there are billionaires who watch this show who are spending a lot of money on Donald Trump, and they don't understand why he's committing political suicide.
What can he do? Are these problems fixable? It sounds like the reason why women or undecided women are now deciding to vote for Kamala Harris, those are things that cannot be fixed.
Yes. So there are three issues. Number one is affordability. We should not call it inflation ever again. It's housing, health care, food, and fuel. And the people that Trump needs cannot afford it either every week or every month. Second, wasteful Washington spending, which you're not talking about anywhere. This was an issue over the last 8 years. Hardworking taxpayers hate it when they see their money being wasted. And third, it's not just immigration, it's safety and security.
Meanwhile, Trump held a rally yesterday in North Carolina where he spent a lot of time attacking Harris and accused her of copying him. Let's watch.
When Kamala lays out her fake economic plan this week, probably will be a copy of my plan because basically that's what she does. Just remember, she goes to work every morning in the West Wing. Her desk is 10 steps from the Oval Office. She cast the tie-breaking votes that gave us record inflation, and for nearly 4 years, Kamala has crackled as the American economy has burned. What happened to her laugh? I haven't heard that laugh in about a week. That's why they keep her off the stage. That's why she's disappeared.
Trump will hold a press conference in Bedminster, New Jersey today, all while Harris continues to face criticism for seemingly avoiding interviews entirely. Harris's communications director was pressed by CNN as to why she wasn't speaking outside of her rallies. Let's watch.
But the Trump campaign is also going after the vice president for not doing enough interviews, for not holding a press conference. Would it kill you guys to have a press conference? Why hasn't she had a press conference?
Listen, the vice president and Governor Walz have been busy crisscrossing this country since the launch of this campaign and adding Governor Walz to the ticket. You saw the ways in which they went across the battleground states last week, generating rallies of thousands, 10,000 here, 15,000 there. But
Michael, you know, a campaign rally is not a press conference.
It's going to be inclusive.
Do you mind if I cut in? I mean, you know, a campaign rally is not a press conference. Why hasn't she had a press conference? She's the vice president. She can handle the questions. Why not do it?
We absolutely are going to do it. You hear her take questions as she's out on the stump. And she said last week, we're going to be having a sit-down interview here before the end of the month.
And in VP news, Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz have both agreed to a debate hosted by CBS on October 1st. Exciting.
I think yes, that is exciting. I wish it was October 31st and they would come in costume because that would be fun, but I don't think we're going to see that. I'm very much looking forward to watching those two go head to head. I asked my mom, who's very representative of like the average voter, no college degree, spent most of her life like not super engaged in politics and kind of sick of the way, the country was being run, especially economically. And I was like, what do you make of this attack line? Do you think Kamala Harris needs to talk to the media? She was like, well, she's doing rallies like every day. She's delivering her message directly to the people. Why do you guys want her to sit down? Because you're the media and you'll get views from it? And I was like, okay, that's interesting that this is, kind of what the average working class person is thinking about this. Because that's kind of how I think about it too, right? She just started running. She's going to deliver her message a bunch so people hear it. That's a strategy, because if they hear her say something so many times, when she sits down with a reporter and they say something to the opposite effect, it's going to be a little bit easier to hear her argument out and believe that to be reality after you've heard it from her quite a few times. You're like, yeah, that sounds about right. Whereas if she did a sit-down interview right away and she let the reporter say, this is the political landscape, this is what's going on, this is what people think of you, that has a little bit more sticking power. So I think they're trying to get a message to the people first, get it in their brains before, the media changes it.
Yeah, I think there's something to what Frank Luntz was saying about many of the fundamentals favoring the Republicans on paper and thus Trump, but Trump being someone who can only capitalize on the fundamentals so much because he is, and this is hard for a lot of his devoted fans to hear because they love him so much. They can't imagine anyone not loving him, but they are not the entire country. There's a lot of them. There's certainly enough of them to have Trump be in charge of the Republican Party for as long as he conceivably wants to be. But outside that bubble, you have a lot of skepticism of Trump. A lot of people just sick of him, tired of him, don't think the things he says are divisive and bad for the country, and they want Republican policies, or at least they think Democratic policies have not succeeded over the period of the Joe Biden presidency, but can't necessarily, are deciding whether they can bring themselves to support Trump. And then, in bringing J.D. Vance onto the ticket, I don't think Trump didn't really reach for those people and say, hey, you can get on board with me. He picked someone who is very much like him, if not exactly temperamentally like him, but very much ideologically like him, and then some. And so we'll see. But Kamala Harris is almost doing very well for herself by not saying very much of anything. I mean, this is going to be very frustrating to me if this ends up being the winning strategy, to not participate in a Democratic primary process at all, not have done any debates with other Democratic candidates, not have staked out any real policy positions, and have signaled via spokespeople that you no longer stand by any of the policy positions that you once had that might be unpopular somewhere, and never give an interview and just win because you're a question mark.
A few things he
I don't
said.
know what that'll say about our system if that works.
I like that Frank Luntz highlighted affordability instead of inflation, because we're seeing inflation slow, and people feel lied to when they hear that. Because purchasing power has not returned to what people expect. The minimum wage is worth 34% less in terms of purchasing power, what you can get for those dollars, since 1968. And so focusing on food, fuel, housing, and healthcare, it makes sense. And I like that he's not talking about government spending in Washington in terms of what amount of dollars give people sticker shock. It's where is their waste happening? That's what people want to be addressed. It's not that they don't want the government to spend anything. They want the government spending to be efficient and be returns to them.
100%.
And I think that's important to highlight. But I do find it terribly funny in Trump's speech that he says Kamala, who he has framed as a radical left communist, as someone who will copy his plan.
Yeah.
That just, those two things cannot be true.
She did copy his plan on the no taxing of the tips, right? I mean, it's a
true.
Pretty direct copying.
That is true. Just like,
she looked over to his, what's on your homework? What's on your quiz?
Yeah.
She did one of those.
Like, we can do that. It neutralizes the threat, but we're expecting her to roll out some kind of plan to address affordability today.
As I said, I want both the candidates to compete to cut taxes as much as possible. So I have no problem with her copying his quiz on that front. More rising in just a minute.
Comedian Theo Vaughn hosted Senator Bernie Sanders on his podcast called This Past Weekend. The pair talked about American democracy, the media, a 32-hour work week, and Bernie's favorite, healthcare for all. The Vermont senator hit on United States healthcare problem, or rather the United States healthcare problem, in the first 15 minutes. Let's watch.
The whole idea that healthcare in America, unlike every other major country, all right, go to Europe, go to Canada, go to many Latin American countries. It is a bloody right, not a privilege. And that's what I think it should be. So we have a system that works very well for the insurance companies and the drug companies. In some cases, you're going to pay 10 times more for medication in America than they do in other countries. That's a whole other story we're trying to deal with right now. But it's a corrupt system benefiting the people who own it, not the ordinary American. You go out on the street, say to people, do you think healthcare is a human right? All people in America should have it? Yeah, we do. That's what I'm fighting for.
Vaughn brought up how many Americans see the tears in the fabric of our country. Take a look.
As a person who, has felt like in their life, maybe their father died in a war, their grandfather died in a war, and they've tried to pay their taxes and be a, considerate person in their town or their country. After a while, those good people starts to erode a little because they don't feel like, and they lose their sense of purpose, man. When you lose the fabric of your society, a lot of people, that's how they didn't even realize it. A lot of us don't even realize we identify as an American. And when you realize, well, America, it's nothing, but it's a shell LLC for big corporations, then what am I? I'm just a idiot, and you almost feel ashamed of yourself, or you can, anyway, I don't know. A lot of that stuff I just don't see how people think that that's good or how you're going to still be able to get people to buy in.
Theo, I think you said it better than I did.
The two-time presidential candidate elaborated on his experience going up against the Democratic establishment. Take a look.
I ran in 2016. I ran against Hillary Clinton, and I ran in 2020.
Yeah, I remember, and I felt like you didn't get treated fairly, to be honest with you.
I didn't, and that's what happens when you take on the establishment. So
yeah.
What happened is we won the first three primaries, and then the establishment got very, very nervous, and there were a whole lot of candidates in the Democratic primary, and they said, hey, be a good idea if you all dropped out, let Joe Biden be the one candidate. People rallied around him.
When asked about Kamala Harris, Bernie said this.
She's persistent, she's strong, and I respect that. And, I think she'll be a good candidate. I was interested that Trump apparently backed out of a debate with her on ABC. And I wouldn't, I have debated her, as a matter of fact. She's tough.
It was just such a good exchange. I feel like Theo Vaughn, he's from Louisiana, I believe, very representative of regular people thinking about the country, thinking about these issues. And Bernie Sanders, comparing his demeanor in an interview with a regular person, I mean, it's a lot of what I saw on the campaign trail. I remember one of the volunteers I had who knocked doors for the campaign, Sue, she was great. And I was like, we need you to speak at this rally. Your story about how you lost the farm following NAFTA policy and all of these disastrous farm bills, people need to hear it. And she was very shy, very nervous. And, Bernie and Jane are backstage. I'm like, it's going to be fine soon. Bernie comes over and he's like, what's going on? Are you nervous to speak? And I'm like, yeah, but, this is going to be fine. She's just going to speak from the heart. And he goes, that's what you need to do. And it's good to see his arms are still working very well. But yeah, that's just who he is. And the way he talks with a regular guy, so different from how he talks to, the New York Times editorial board, sussing out if they want to endorse him or not. Well, so it's good to see him in this environment.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very effective speaker. Look, I respect him. I don't agree with him on very much, although I certainly agree that there are problems with our healthcare system. When he's talking about a system that's mostly designed for the benefit of insurance companies, I absolutely agree with that. It's the system we have is not a good one. I think we would disagree on what the solution to that is, but I would never defend the current system. It is wildly inefficient and wasteful. But he's a very effective advocate for his ideas, and he's a year older than Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. But I would never accuse him of cognitive decline, because he has no cognitive decline. He is as sharp as ever. He is unchanged. He's exactly who he is. And it shows you that this kind of thing hits people at different stages of their life. People can go on being completely effective and altogether there in their 80s and even 90s in some cases. he hasn't slowed down a bit. And the contrast between that, it's not really the number itself. It's because it's different for every person. You know, he's 82, Biden's 81. The difference for Biden over time is so dramatic. It actually seems more dramatic to me when you then hear from someone like Bernie Sanders. Like, they're not, everybody's getting older, but everybody's not getting older at the same rate.
Yeah, I appreciate Theo Von bringing in the feelings of what it's like to work in a country where a lot of the jobs are with the biggest corporations. Walmart and Amazon are some of the biggest employers, and wages being so low that you can't afford an average rent apartment in many cities. In a lot of them, you can't afford even median rent. That's crazy, and I can't imagine the people that were listening to Bernie in 2020 and 2016 who maybe didn't see that side of America, didn't see the trends in productivity per hour increasing exponentially since 1950 for people doing manual labor, and seeing the compensation for wages in terms of purchasing power, inflation-adjusted wages, going down and down and down. You've got to feel unappreciated by your society because a lot of what we do in our waking hours is work. And we're a country of a lot of workers. We have a higher employment rate than a lot of other countries. So much of our identity is associated with our work.
My identity is wholly based on my work. I am nothing beyond this show. I shut down. I'm a robot. I go to sleep when the camera's not on.
Yeah, I think it breaks people's hearts to see their work seemingly not appreciated when they can hardly pay their bills but are giving all of their time to their job.
Yeah.
So I think it's good they touched on that.
Yeah. I'm just always glad to see political figures do alternative media, talk with people like Theo Von who don't fit neatly into one box or another. You know, I'm sure he probably has a lot of conservative people. They might not even think of themselves as conservative people, not like Republicans, but people who are culturally conservative or at least like anti-wokeness, anti-political correctness. You know, what some people call the barstool conservatives. Probably has that kind of audience. So it's always a smart idea. More political figures should do it to go into spaces like that. If you're if you're a committed ideological Democrat, as Bernie is, to speak to that audience. Although there's probably an eclectic bunch, just like the people watching our show are an eclectic bunch. And I think it's always to the benefit of important, influential figures to swing by, chat with us, and see what the viewers think. More Rising right after this. Mirror, mirror on the wall, what is the most controversial Disney reboot of all? It's, of course, the new Snow White film, as you probably guessed. Disney recently unveiled the trailer for its live-action adaptation, which has gotten tons of negative attention for a while now. It all started with the 7 dwarves. Yes, of course, the dwarves, Sleepy, Doc, Grumpy, etc. They had paraded around the movie set. The dwarves at the time were both women and men of different ethnicities, with one dwarf actor. But a lot earlier, Peter Dinklage of Game of Thrones fame had actually attacked Disney for casting little people as dwarves, implying that I guess they shouldn't have the opportunities that he had had. So the solution to that, according to Disney, was to remove the actors and replace them with 7 CGI'd magical creatures that appear as the dwarves.
Who can forget the classic 1937 version where the Queen asks the question, "Who is the fairest of them all?" Not a very woke question in 2024, now is it? The people behind the film, including Greta Gerwig of Barbie fame, promise that this version will have modern twists. But it's not the storyline that has garnered press. Negative attention has zeroed in around the actress playing Snow White, Rachel Zegler, who has previously said she didn't like the original 1937 movie. Let's watch.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious.
And Israeli actress Gal Gadot plays the evil queen. Meanwhile, Ziegler is known for her pro-Palestinian stance. Just this week, Ziegler thanked her fans for all the views on the trailer, and then in a separate tweet wrote, quote, "And always remember, free Palestine." The movie won't hit theaters till March after being delayed by a year for a major overhaul. Disney cited the SAG-AFTRA strike for the major reason behind the delay, though some skeptics question whether Disney was buying themselves more time to reshoot over-woke scenes. So Robby, I know you're a fantasy fan, so much so that we're talking about the horns, because a lot of people thought that Angelina Jolie's character...
I had to correct one of our producers that the Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty and the evil queen from Snow White are totally different characters.
And we learned yesterday we work with a Disney adult.
I would not describe myself as a, as a Disney adult.
Even though they own Star Wars now?
I
What are we to
watch
do
a lot
with
of Disney Plus, yes. I was watching Disney Plus last night. I was going through the Marvel movies yet again. So this Snow White movie just seems like a disaster on every front for a variety of reasons. One, the dwarf thing is, so this is like a wokeness thing, because Peter Dinklage, who is a dwarf actor, famous, probably the most famous dwarf actor from Game of Thrones, played Tyrion Lannister, said something like it was racist to cast dwarves in this role. And then a bunch of dwarf actors were like, well, thanks a lot, buddy. Just pull up the ladder behind you, why don't you? These are like roles we can get, and you're making it more difficult. So that didn't make a lot of sense. So then the Snow White production didn't quite know how to deal with this, and it ends up having, I think it's CGI dwarves in it. Then there's Rachel Ziegler herself. So she said, like, I mean, it's fine to just not like the original film. I don't particularly like the original film either. It's fine. It's like historic. It's a very simple story, like incredibly simple, little saccharine, I would say, in terms of its sweetness. So fine to not like it, but she suggested it was just too old-fashioned because, of course, the heroine can't rescue herself. She has to get rescued by a prince. That kind of way, we can't have any stories where traditionally masculine figures rescue a damsel in distress. Okay, whatever. Maybe just make a new story then, if that's what is bothering you so much. And then there's the whole Israel-Palestine aspect of it, because she's, like many progressive young people, a strong supporter of the Palestinians, which is fine. But Gal Gadot, some left people want the whole movie boycotted because it has Gal Gadot in it, and Gal Gadot is Israeli and is very supportive of Israel. I think, didn't she serve in the IDF at some point, I believe? So there's that whole dynamic to it.
I think they should Spaceballs the whole thing and do an anti-woke version where little people play Snow White and the Queen and all of the characters, and then the dwarves are played by very tall people. I think that would be a very smart move, PR-wise. Whoever wants to make it, they can't call it Spaceballs.
Sometimes
something else.
Sometimes the dwarves are just played by. I was thinking of, so there was that Snow White and the Huntsman the Winter War movies that are in the Snow White cinematic universe, in which I believe the dwarves there are just played by actors who are not themselves dwarves, like Bob Hoskins is in it, and the guy from Shaun of the Dead. And then in Once Upon a Time, the show that was on ABC for like 1 million seasons, which I watched some of it, not all of it. Some of it was good, some of it was quite bad. They were again played by, I believe, normal-sized people. So this is a problem you can get around.
Yeah, I think that the original movie is kind of, I don't want to say woke because it's not the modern.
It's just a little too simple.
Colloquial
it's
word.
A little too simple.
I think the message of like, it is true in our society, mostly because we've lived in a patriarchal society and Western culture is patriarchal.
Oh boy.
Robbie's already smirking.
Oh boy.
So because it's a thing that women aging makes them less attractive to men. There are many studies that show men typically find women like under the age of 23 most attractive, whereas women, it usually carries in tandem with their age.
Well, everyone still finds Gal Gadot perfectly attractive. She's like the most beautiful woman on the planet, and she's the evil queen who's being jealous and replaced.
If I said that on Twitter, there would be people in the comments saying she's too old and geriatric and blah,
really?
blah, blah. This is the world we live in. It's very sad.
I don't think so.
And so it is true that like older women have, if they're not like people very in touch with their emotions and very healed, they will get jealous of younger women simply because of their good looks, right? And their youth. And so I think, Snow White in some ways is a story about that, a cautionary tale for both older and younger women, that we should be supportive of each other and sort of not believe in this thing.
Oh, okay.
And so I see the original story as kind of feminist in that way.
I like that take. That's a take I can handle.
Yeah, and she falls in love. Yes, it's a prince. It could have been a princess. That's fine too. But for some people, it's a prince, and that makes her feel better about the whole thing. It saves her. She's like, oh, it doesn't matter what this evil old lady thinks. You know, that's nice. It's a good message.
Well, obviously, the very memorable part of the movie, right, is the transformation that the queen undergoes to become, because she's going to go poison Snow White with the apple, and she transforms herself into this hunched, terrifying, hooded, Emperor Palpatine type figure to cite another Disney property.
The
and
attack
then goes
on
to
my life has left me maimed.
Yes. We will reorganize the first galactic empire. So great. And then she poisons Snow White, and then Snow White also goes to sleep. I see why people get it confused with Sleeping Beauty, because it also has too many of these movies these stories had a girl falls asleep sort of hook to them.
It's honestly really nice, Robbie, to have representation in media as a sleepy girl.
Yeah. You identify with the tired, the bored. Sleeping Beauty is a better movie because the villain Maleficent, who is not a queen, she's an enchantress, turns into a dragon, which is just cooler, and she's scarier, and there's something more compelling about her, I think. I would like Angelina Jolie did a fine job with that. I would also like to see. I think Gal Gadot could have handled that role quite well. I love Gal Gadot. I think she's great in everything. I loved Wonder Woman. The second movie was terrible. The second one was absolutely one of the worst movies I've ever seen. But the first one was great. And she was in an adaptation of Death on the Nile, which is my favorite or second favorite Agatha Christie story that was very good. She's terrific.
I appreciate the fantasy knowledge you bring to this. However, the standard for women is too high that instead of turning into an old woman, we have to now become a dragon in order to be accepted.
To win my affection, you have to become a dragon. We want dragons.
I'll work on it.
All right, more Rising right after this.
This is crazy. During a recent Kamala Harris rally in Massachusetts, Secret Service agents appeared to put tape over the lens of a security camera and enter a closed salon while alarms blared, all to use a bathroom. Basically, a Massachusetts salon owner, Alicia Powers, decided to close her business for the day when Harris scheduled her fundraiser nearby at the end of July. Per Business Insider, recently released security footage shows a person dressed as a Secret Service agent taping the security camera outside the salon. Powers told Insider, quote, "There were several people in and out for about an hour and a half just using my bathroom. The alarms going off, using my counter with no permission." Powers said that she felt, quote, violated and, quote, disrespected. A Secret Service spokesperson confirmed to USA Today that the woman in the security footage was an agent, but said that the agent did not access the salon. The spokesperson said, quote, "Our personnel would not enter or instruct our partners to enter a business without the owner's permission." Nonetheless, representatives for the Secret Service reached out to Powers to apologize. So this is not how eminent domain works. Any governmental employee cannot just seize access to a business. People are saying that Secret Service were the ones who picked the lock. This is some accounts of the story. Powers obviously can't determine who picked the lock because the Secret Service agent covered the camera. And this comes after Trump's assassination attempt. Is the Secret Service trying to shirk some kind of accountability of how they operate during events they're supposed to secure?
Yes. This is crazy. Thank you for calling this story to our attention. This isn't even eminent domain. This is like, what is it that the Third Amendment to the Constitution
Quartering
prohibits?
soldiers?
Yes, right? This isn't
Yeah.
it. You can't do that. They can't just violate someone's. You gotta ask to use the. I mean, look, I appreciate that they're on the job, and working people need access to facilities. That's why they bring out the portable facilities for people doing road work and things like that, so they don't have to ask people to use their homes, and that it should be made easier for working people to have their needs met in that way. But you can't just barge into someone's residence and then tape the security cameras so they don't catch you. That's some juvenile shit.
I wonder how common of a practice it is for Secret Services operating in an area. Perhaps there was an agent posted near the door, so they were like, I'm securing the area, so there's no need for this camera. Still, they shouldn't be able to do that. But how common is it that they are covering up security cameras? And if not Secret Service, and if a Secret Service agent wasn't there preventing people from entering the business, they just covered the security camera of who was going in and out. Who are the people that are on the security camera using the bathroom? Thankfully, it sounds like nothing was stolen. So it's not like this was a group of people trying to commit some kind of property crime, just using the bathroom. At the end of the day, I will say, we need more access to public restrooms in America. It's very difficult to use the bathroom unless you're spending money somewhere.
Sure. If this was a one-off, whatever, it would be a funny story. A funny story and a obvious violation of someone's property rights and a bad thing. But this is a time where the Secret Service is obviously under a lot of deserved scrutiny for what went wrong in Pennsylvania when Donald Trump was nearly assassinated, when there appeared to be many security lapses. Now, he discussed it with Elon Musk just this week, again, what happened to him that night, and he was very thankful to, that day, rather, it wasn't at night, was very thankful to the Secret Service agents who pulled him to the ground and protected him, but notes that we have a lot of questions about how they could have not secured that rooftop where the gunman shot from. They said that was outside the perimeter, as AOC asked a great question when the Secret Service head was grilled. Well, if the distance from which you can use that weapon to shoot and that was well within the range that someone can make that shot quite easily. It was not a difficult shot. It was a more difficult shot for the Secret Service person that killed the sniper who killed the shooter. Now he's a sniper, so he made the shot. One shot killed him. The assassin did not have a difficult shot given the distance and that weapon. So why would that not have been included in the perimeter? Why the delay in letting Trump's Secret Service detail the people with him by the stage to pull him down? So this is not at all similar to that, but it's, we like to think of the Secret Service as this, kind of competent, invincible Kingsguard, as it were, and maybe they're just like any other government agency.
Yeah, I think people need more from the Secret Service as to why this happened. I would be satisfied with an explanation of, we cover security cameras in the area in case someone's monitoring, planning something, plotting something, and they're using their proximity to wherever the target would be in order to, attack them in some way. Like, there needs to be some logical reason for why this camera was covered. Because obviously the first conclusion is, well, the Secret Service is under scrutiny and they want to shirk public accountability in some way. So it's very good that this woman released the camera footage to Business Insider, or knew to go to the media and press, because that's what you should do. You don't get a lot of accountability for things like this. If she was just like, hey, Secret Service, I have a video that looks like you doing this, they wouldn't be inclined to do much of anything. But now, because it's coming from the media, now people are going to start questioning what happened that day, how frequently is this happening. Now I think, we're more likely to get some kind of clarity from the Secret Service because she leaked this footage to the press.
Yeah, and you say about covering up the cameras, that's always, whenever a government agency, people say, they want less transparency, that's always a tell. That's always an alarm. Usually, it's not that they need to, nobody can see what they're doing. Yeah, this doesn't cut it with me. We need to know, police body cams are a good idea, and they can be protective of the police.
Yeah.
Because if the police get falsely accused of something, or they have an interaction with someone, and someone says, you drew on me for, whatever, you are in the wrong, well, the camera can help acquit them if that's the case. These are public servants who are, trusted, who are given a very important duty and should be, well compensated and well protected and well regarded, but have to also then serve competently and with scrutiny from the public and from accountability agencies.
I have to say, it would be fascinating if this became some kind of lawsuit where the Secret Service was sued for their action that day, because she's not able to figure out who broke into her salon because of their actions. People did break in. And you have a right to private property in the United States. And so I can imagine a world where there's a lawsuit and the Supreme Court has to make some kind of ruling like, does this count as quartering soldiers? Does this count as the U.S. government, the federal government, violating a private citizen's right to privacy? There are so many constitutional implications to this. It seems like some kind of violation of basic liberties.
Yeah, people joke that there's no, there's a Second Amendment defense group, there are First Amendment defense groups. For the other, there's no Third Amendment defense group because that's one the government generally has stopped violating since in the last 200 years. But occasionally you do have examples of for police raids or police purposes having someone's house taken over briefly, and whether that's a violation of the Third Amendment is something I've heard some of my very libertarian-minded constitutional scholars debating. More Rising right after this.
Very strange. That's how senior reporter Edward Isaac Dover characterized new bombshell reporting that Hunter Biden asked the State Department to help out Burisma, a Ukrainian energy company that the first son had business deals with.
A group of CNN panelists discussed the possible ramifications Hunter's previous activity could have on Kamala Harris's presidential run. This is what Dover said. Let's take a look.
This isn't great. Hunter Biden, everybody in the White House has known for a long time as an issue. The way that that his lawyers responded to this disclosure, to say like, well, yeah, he sent letters but did nothing wrong. It doesn't. This feels very strange to people that the vice president's son was sending letters or making requests to other government officials and saying, hey, would you meet with this company? It may have been legal. We don't know anything otherwise at this point. Like Matt said, we haven't seen the contents of the letter. It does look like he was at least making people say, you notice my last name though, right?
Finally, some acknowledgement. I mean, they've acknowledged it before, but I just can't help but marvel at how the Hunter Biden issue has changed so much over the years from, what are you talking about? There's nothing sketchy about this guy. And in fact, efforts to make him seem sketchy are part of a deliberate plot by foreign adversaries to make you lose confidence in Joe Biden himself. And now they're all like, well, yeah, he did absolutely try to use his last name, his proximity to Joe Biden, to make money for himself and foreign companies, governments, public-private partnerships in Europe and China and elsewhere. But, Biden was not, no evidence. Biden himself was involved. Okay, fine. But we've really moved along. We've moved the ball down the field on the whole Hunter Biden issue.
Yeah, you can't ask officials at the U.S. Embassy in Italy to approve some kind of permits or push the Italian government to approve some kind of energy permits in the northern region of Italy. You have to get a cabinet position to do that, Hunter Biden. Only people working for the deep state, for the national security establishment and the CIA are allowed to make moves like this. You can't just be the president's son and do that. You have to get appointed to a position to do that. This is America.
There's something to that it's still corruption when it's happening officially. Legally. But what's so apparent about Hunter Biden's corruption is that it's just like so sleazy and obvious. Like,
try harder.
Yeah, he's not disguised. It's not disguised at all. It's just
incredible.
Sneaky
about it, Hunter Biden.
Like they knew what they were. Burisma knew what they were paying him for. I can't recall off the top of my head what the salary was. It was an eye-popping figure that they halved as soon as Joe Biden ceased to be the vice president. They knew what they were paying for. They were paying for the last name. They were paying for that maybe Hunter Biden, it's clear he tried to do this, could trick his dad into calling him when he was in the presence of important officials he was trying to leverage, or could have his dad at some dinner where there's some business partner to shake hands with him. That's what he was paying him for. And I know Joe Biden loves his son and doesn't want to think the worst of him and wants to maybe encourage his endeavors, maybe supports his painting or something, but was put in a very difficult decision by this just utterly corrupt line of business scheming that Hunter was involved in.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who end up serving in public office who are on the board of certain companies, and I think that it's time we suss out that conflict of interest. It's not so different from the potential legislation we're going to see around insider trading. legislation that now Nancy Pelosi suddenly endorsed after her portfolio, the insider portfolio, they call it, that mirrors all of her trades because she always outperforms the market. It's so funny that as soon as she loses power as Speaker of the House, she would never bring that to a floor vote. She would never entertain it. But now that she's not the Speaker of the House, she's like, yeah, we should do something about stock trades.
Remember when she tried to say we can't prohibit Congress from engaging in stock trading because we're a capitalist country? It's like, that's not, I support capitalism. It's not when the government figures can do it. They're the ones ostensibly who are supposed to make the regulations. If they can use the knowledge they know, the skills they have from like, that's worse than insider trading, because at least insider trading, which I know is illegal and bad, but that's even just involving private people with private knowledge. This is people who actually make the rules, using that to their advantage. Like, that's not at all capitalism. It's just the lamest excuse you ever made.
I sound like a Fox News dad that gets all of his news from that show, because I'm like, speaking of Hunter Biden, Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah,
but
that's fair enough.
It is true that she's had such a buzzer beater of a career. I mean, she's finally using her leverage to do things that people want her to do instead of members of the Democratic Party.
Like get Joe Biden ousted?
Like get Joe Biden ousted. Say she favors Tim Walz. Who knows what her rule was in getting Walz the vice presidential nomination. Then you have now talks that she is behind pushing a halt to arms transfers to Israel, for the Biden administration to have conditions on giving Israel weapons. What? This doesn't sound like Nancy Pelosi. That's on top of this new position on insider trading. It's just crazy. She's like, I'm gonna be a corporate member of the House. I'm gonna use my power to make a bunch of money. And then as soon as I get out, I'm gonna pull the ladder out from behind me and say, none of you other guys can make power or make decisions that enrich you while you're in power. I mean, I like it. I support what she's doing. Kind of messed up that she didn't do it earlier in her career, but I'll take it.
She's a very powerful political figure. She's been the true power on the Democratic side in Washington for decades now. I think that's fair to say.
Nancy's crazy. I say Fox News dad because there's a Shane Gillis bit where the dad watches Fox all day and you're like, oh, like what's going on in the world? And he's like, well, Nancy Pelosi's a B word. And it's like, oh, what'd she do? And he's like, she's just a B word. And they can't really say why, but they've been fed this rage about Nancy Pelosi. We can name many things that Nancy Pelosi has done that's unfavorable, but I think now she's doing good things. But yes, it's worth noting that people in power are legally corrupt. Hunter Biden just wasn't so careful to make his actions legal. He should have registered as a foreign agent. This all would have been perfectly legal, and that's horrible.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if there's additional legal scrutiny of him, including more investigations, if the House Oversight Committee, the James Comer team, are going to do anything about this. They've called Biden crime family most corrupt political dynasty in history, have made a lot of hay over it, and now they get some new fodder for that. So I definitely expect them to look into it, as they should.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
that does it for us today on Rising and for this week. Great having you here, Jess. Tomorrow, I believe, is Amber and Nomiki. Is that correct?
This time it's actually me. Last week
you
I
are.
said it was me. It was not. But this week it'll be
Jessica, who is working very, very hard for the Hill lately, is going to be hosting tomorrow. I will be off, but we will both be back with you next week for an exciting week of the Democratic National Convention, where they will presumably christen Kamala Harris as the candidate, although anything can happen, ladies and gentlemen. This is a crazy, it could be, that's not really happening, but we're making jokes, but who knows? Yeah. So you'll want to tune into our coverage all next week for sure. In the meantime, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're available anywhere you can find podcasts. Thanks for listening.
Bye, y'all.